May 27, 1941, 10:36 in the morning. The North Atlantic is a gray, violent wilderness. Waves the height of houses smash against steel. And then, silence. 41 minutes after the first British shell screams across the water, the most feared warship on Earth rolls onto her side, her red and black war ensign still flying, and disappears beneath the waves. 8,000 tons of armor, 8 38-centimeter guns, a crew of over 2,200 men, gone. The Bismarck, the unsinkable predator that had humiliated the Royal Navy just 3 days earlier, is no more. How did the pride of Hitler's fleet die so fast? This is the story of those final 41 minutes, and the 3 days of blood and fire that led to them. To understand why Bismarck sank in less than an hour, we have to go back to the night of May 18, 1941. Kiel, Germany. Floodlights bathe the massive battleship in cold white light. Adolf Hitler himself has come to see her off. He walks the deck with Grand Admiral Erich Raeder and the ship's commander, Captain Ernst Lindemann, a tall, precise officer who has spent 2 years turning Bismarck into the deadliest surface raider ever built. Hitler is nervous. He asks Lindemann, almost in a whisper, "Do you think she can break out into the Atlantic?" Lindemann's answer is calm, confident. "Mein Führer, if any ship can do it, Bismarck can. She is breathtaking. 61,000 tons fully loaded. A beam of 118 feet. Armor belt 320 millimeters thick. Able to shrug off almost anything afloat. 8 15-inch guns that can hurl a 1,800-pound shell 22 miles. Speed, over 30 knots, faster than almost every battleship in the world. To the German public, she is invincible. To the British Admiralty, she is a nightmare on water. The mission is codenamed Rheinübung, Exercise Rhine. Bismarck, accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, is to slip through the Royal Navy's blockade, reach the open Atlantic, and tear apart the convoys that are keeping Britain alive. One battleship, operating alone for weeks, could sink 1 million tons of shipping and possibly force Churchill to the peace table. Admiral Gunther Lütjens, the fleet commander flying his flag in Bismarck, knows the stakes. He is not as optimistic as Lindemann. Lütjens had argued against the operation. Germany's surface fleet is still too small, the British radar too good, the risk too high. But Hitler wants a propaganda victory, and Raeder wants to prove the Kriegsmarine matters. So on the evening of May 18th, under cover of darkness, the two gray giants weigh anchor and steam north. For 3 days they ghost along the Norwegian coast, hidden by fjords and low cloud. Then, on the 21st, a Swedish cruiser spots them. Within hours, London knows. The home fleet at Scapa Flow goes to action stations. Every available battleship, cruiser, and aircraft carrier is ordered to sea. Churchill's directive is simple and brutal. Sink the Bismarck. May 23rd. The Denmark Strait, a narrow, icy passage between Greenland and Iceland. Fog, snow squalls, visibility barely 2 miles. At 7:22 p.m., lookouts on the British heavy cruiser Norfolk spot 2 shapes emerging from the mist. Moments later, the battlecruiser HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy for 2 decades, and the brand new battleship Prince of Wales steam into view on the opposite course. Lütjens never wanted this fight. His orders are to avoid combat with capital ships and save Bismarck for the merchant war. But Hood opens fire first. The Battle of the Denmark Strait lasts less than 10 minutes, yet it shocks the world. At 5:52 a.m. on May 24th, Bismarck's 5th salvo finds Hood. One shell, possibly from the 3rd turret, Bruno, plunges into the old battlecruiser's thinly armored deck near the mainmast, penetrates to the aft 4-inch magazine. A sheet of flame 1,000 feet high erupts. Hood breaks in half and sinks in 3 minutes. Out of 1,418 men, only 3 survive. Winston Churchill will later call it the most calamitous blow the Royal Navy had ever received in a single action. Bismarck does not escape unscathed. A 14-inch shell from Prince of Wales strikes below the waterline, ripping open a fuel tank. Thousands of tons of oil begin to leak. Contaminated fuel floods 2 boilers. Speed drops, and a 9-degree list to port appears. More critically, Bismarck is now leaving a visible oil slick, a trail the Royal Navy can follow to the ends of the earth. Lütjens makes the fateful decision. Detach Prinz Eugen to continue the raid alone, and steer Bismarck toward the French port of Brest for repairs. He still believes he can outrun the pursuit. He is wrong. For the next 31 hours, the greatest naval hunt in history unfolds across 2,000 miles of ocean. Swordfish torpedo bombers from the carrier Victorious brave 80-knot winds to attack at night. One torpedo hits amidships but causes only minor damage. Destroyers shadow the wounded giant through the darkness, their radar painting her like a ghost on green screens. Lütjens knows time is against him. In a radio message to Berlin, he admits, "Ship unmanageable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." Then, on the night of May 26th, everything changes. 15 Swordfish from the carrier Ark Royal launch into a howling gale. Their target is actually the British cruiser Sheffield by mistake at first, but once corrected, they find Bismarck in the dusk. One torpedo jams the rudders hard to port, 12 degrees, and locks them there. Bismarck begins steaming in a wide, helpless circle at 8 to 10 knots. Lütjens reportedly stares at the compass and says quietly, "She won't answer anymore." Dawn, May 27th. The battleships King George V and Rodney close in for the kill, guns loaded and crews at action stations for days. At 8:47 a.m., Rodney opens fire with her 16-inch guns from 25,000 yards. The first salvo straddles. The second hits. This is where the 41 minutes begin. What happens next is not a battle. It is an execution. 8:47 a.m., Tuesday, May 27th, 1941. The sea is a cold, heaving slate under a low sky. Bismarck steams in slow, wounded circles, her rudders jammed, her bows pointed stubbornly northwest, as if she still believes France is somewhere over the horizon. Two British battleships, Rodney and King George V, close to point-blank range. Behind them, the heavy cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire wait like wolves at the edge of the pack. On Bismarck's bridge, Admiral Lütjens stands motionless beside Captain Lindemann. Neither man speaks much anymore. They have both accepted what is coming. "We were so close you could see the Germans on the upper deck. Some were waving, some just standing there. I remember thinking, my God, they're still proud." Rodney fires first. 9 16-inch guns, each shell weighing just over a ton, roar out at 2-second intervals. The muzzle flashes light up the dawn like orange lightning. The shells take 25 seconds to reach their target. When they land, the effect is apocalyptic. The first full salvo strikes Bismarck just forward of the bridge. One shell punches straight through the thinly armored conning tower and explodes inside. Shrapnel tears through the armored glass. Admiral Lütjens is almost certainly killed instantly, though no one will ever know the exact moment. Captain Lindemann is seen staggering, blood streaming down his face, refusing to leave the bridge. The forward fire control director, the crow's nest with the big rangefinder, is blown clean off the mast and crashes onto the catapult deck in a tangle of steel and bodies. At 9:02, only 15 minutes into the action, Bismarck's forward turrets Anton and Bruno fall silent. The 15-inch guns that destroyed Hood are reduced to twisted metal. Men inside the turrets are incinerated by the flash of penetrating shells. Others drown in the smoke and steam as seawater floods through ruptured seams. Survivors crawl out onto the forecastle, some on fire, some missing limbs, only to be cut down by the splinters that whip across the deck at bullet speed. King George V joins from the starboard side, her 14-inch guns hammering the waterline. Every hit sends a shudder through Bismarck's 50,000-ton hull. Armor-piercing shells that fail to penetrate the main belt detonate against it anyway, ripping off grate plates and exposing the vitals beneath. The British gunners are shooting so well that some salvos land with all shells within a 200-yard circle, an almost impossible feat in those seas. The noise, you cannot imagine. It was like being inside a steel drum while giants beat it with hammers. The lights went out, the ship screamed, and the heat from the burning cordite came up through the decks like hell itself had opened. By 9:15, the secondary armament, the 15 centimeters and 10.5 centimeters guns, is being systematically wiped out. British destroyers have closed in and are raking the upper decks with 4.7-inch fire. Bodies slide across the tilting steel, leaving long red streaks. Surgeon Commander Franz is killed at his battle dressing station on the port battery deck when a 16-inch shell bursts overhead. The wounded he was treating die with him, yet Bismarck refuses to sink. The armored citadel, the great box of steel protecting engines and magazines, is still intact. She is burning from stem to stern, listing heavily to port, but her hull is not yet broken. To the British, it is almost uncanny. Rodney's captain, Frederick Dalrymple Hamilton, turns to his gunnery officer and says, half in awe, half in frustration, "She's still floating. My God, she's still floating." 9:31 a.m. Rodney fires her last 16-inch broadside. She is almost out of ammunition after 2 days of steaming and shooting. King George V is down to 37 shells per gun. Both battleships turn away to conserve their remaining rounds for the journey home. The cruisers take over. Now comes the moment that still haunts British veterans. Dorsetshire and Norfolk close to less than 3,000 yards, point blank for naval guns, and switch to high-explosive shells. They begin pounding the waterline and superstructure with deliberate, merciless precision. At the same time, Dorsetshire's torpedo officer, Lieutenant Commander George Barnes, requests permission to finish the job the old-fashioned way. Permission granted. 9:40 a.m. Dorsetshire fires 2 21-inch torpedoes into Bismarck's starboard side. Both hit. Massive columns of water rise higher than the masts. A minute later, she fires a third torpedo into the port side, the side already deep in the water. That one is probably the fatal blow. The great ship rolls further, hesitates, then begins her final plunge. At 10:36, the bows rise almost vertically. The propellers are still turning slowly, churning red water. Men slide down the deck into the sea. Some jump, some are thrown. Hundreds cling to the railing until the very last second. Then, at 10:40 exactly, 41 minutes after Rodney's first salvo, Bismarck rolls completely over. For a moment, her flat red bottom is exposed to the sky like a dying whale. The swastika ensigns are still nailed to the mainmast and the jackstaff. They disappear last. Then she slides under. Only 115 men will be rescued, 110 by the British, 5 more later by German vessels. 2,200 go with her. Among the dead, Lutyens, Lindemann, and almost every officer on the bridge. The North Atlantic closes over Europe's most powerful battleship as if she had never existed. In the aftermath, British sailors stared at the empty sea and felt something close to grief. Able seaman Robert Tilley on Dorsetshire wrote in his diary that night, "We cheered when she went down, then we felt sick. She was the enemy. But Christ, what a ship." But the story doesn't end with the bubbles. For decades, arguments have raged. Was Bismarck actually sunk by British shells and torpedoes? Or did her own crew scuttle her to deny the enemy a prize? And why, after everything she endured, did she finally die so quickly? For 80 years, one question has hung over those final 41 minutes like Atlantic fog. Did the Royal Navy actually sink the Bismarck? Or did the Germans sink themselves? I was in the after-gunnery control station when the order came. The admiral was dead. The captain was dead. The ship was burning and helpless. First Officer Hans Oles came running through the wreckage shouting, "Scuttle the ship! Save yourselves if you can." That was the moment we opened the sea valves and set the demolition charges. Mullenheim Rechberg, 4th Gunnery Officer, 36 years old at the time, was one of the last men to leave the armored citadel alive. He insists that long before Dorsetshire's final torpedo struck, Bismarck's crew had already condemned her. Seacocks opened, valves smashed with sledgehammers, explosive charges placed deep in the hull. All of it ordered in the last 10 minutes of the fight. The British naturally tell a different story. Martin, nonsense. We hit her with 3 torpedoes at point-blank range. One of them struck right under the bridge, the other 2 amidships. I watched the explosions myself. She rolled over within minutes. No scuttling could have done it that fast. So who's right? Let's look at the cold evidence. First, the wreck. Bismarck lay undisturbed for 48 years on the slope of an extinct underwater volcano, 15,700 feet down. In 1989, Dr. Robert Ballard, the man who found Titanic, located her with the submersible Argo. He expected to find a hull torn open by British shells. Instead, he found something else entirely. The bottom is relatively intact. There are no catastrophic shell holes below the waterline in the armored citadel, the part that mattered. The main belt is dented and cracked in places, but never fully penetrated by the largest British shells. The real damage is concentrated in two areas: massive circular holes along both sides, perfectly consistent with scuttling charges detonating inside the ship. 3 clear torpedo strikes, 2 starboard, 1 port, that tore open the thinner upper hull but did not reach the vitals. Ballard's conclusion, delivered quietly to the camera in 1989, stunned the naval world. "From what I can see, she was scuttled. The British beat her to death, but the Germans delivered the coup de grace." Later expeditions, 2001, 2002, using Russian Mir submersibles confirmed it. James Cameron himself went down in 2002 and filmed the open sea valves, still turned to the open position, and the remains of demolition charges in the engine rooms. So the truth is a cruel paradox. The Royal Navy hammered Bismarck into a floating inferno for 41 minutes, silenced every gun, killed almost every officer, reduced the upper works to scrap. But the armored raft that kept her afloat was still fundamentally sound. Without the scuttling, she might have burned for hours, perhaps even been taken in tow. The Germans chose death over surrender, and that choice was not made lightly. Von Mullenheim-Rechberg: "We were raised on the idea that a German warship never lowers her flag." Captain Lindemann had said it many times. A German battleship fights until she sinks or until there is no one left to fire a gun. To strike the colors would have been unthinkable. Unthinkable. In the last radio message sent from Bismarck, broken, frantic, at 9:10 a.m., the words are still chilling. "We fight to the last man with the last round. Ship still maneuverable." It was a lie. The ship was no longer maneuverable, and most of the rounds were gone. But the sentiment was real. Meanwhile, on the British ships, the mood was turning grim. After the cheering died away, Dorsetshire and the Maori lowered boats and Carly floats into the oily water. Hundreds of German sailors were swimming among the dead and the debris. Some were singing Deutschland über alles as they waited to be picked up. Others simply floated face down. Then the cry went up, "U-boat alarm!" A periscope was reported, almost certainly imaginary, but the fear was enough. Captain Martin on Dorsetshire gave the order every sailor dreaded: recover our own men, abandon the rescue. Only 110 Germans were pulled aboard before the British ships turned away and steamed for home at full speed. One of those saved was a young sailor's pet cat, Oscar, clinging to a floating plank. The British kept him as a mascot. He lived another 12 years. In Berlin, the news arrived like a body blow. Hitler raged at the Kriegsmarine staff. "Why did we ever build these damned big ships? They only give the enemy target practice." Grand Admiral Rudder offered his resignation. It was refused. The era of the great German surface raider was over. From that day forward, Hitler fixated on submarines and secret weapons. Tirpitz, Bismarck's sister, would spend the rest of the war hiding in Norwegian fjords, too frightened to leave. In London, the relief was physical. Churchill stood up in the House of Commons on May 27th and announced simply, "I have just received information that the Bismarck has been sunk." The entire chamber rose and cheered for 5 solid minutes. But the cost was staggering. Hood and 1,415 of her men were gone. The Royal Navy had expended almost its entire stock of heavy ammunition in the North Atlantic. And 2,200 German sailors, most under 25, lay with Bismarck on the cold volcanic slope. Every year on May 27th, the survivors, British and German, used to exchange letters. No hatred, just quiet remembrance of a morning when steel and fire and pride all met their limit. One British veteran wrote to Mullenheim-Rechberg in 1975, "We did our duty, you did yours. The sea took the judgment out of our hands." Today, the wreck lies in international waters, designated a war grave. Her propellers are gone, salvaged by souvenir hunters before protection came. Her swastikas have been covered with steel plates out of respect for the dead. But the 4 great guns of Turret Caesar still point defiantly aft, exactly as they did when she rolled over. She is silent now. Yet if you descend in a submersible and drift past her shattered bridge, past the open valves, past the boots and helmets fused to the teak deck by 80 years of pressure and salt, you can still almost hear them. The engines that once shook the ocean. The voices of young men singing their anthem as the water closed over them. And the final, unspoken thought that must have passed between Lutyens and Lindemann in that last moment on the bridge. We will not strike the colors.